Hey, how's it going? Today's video, I'm going to go over what is the hardest, in my opinion, what is the hardest tournament lake in the nation, whether that be to just consistently do well. And I looked at it from a number of perspectives. Diversity of the fishery, pressure, the amount of locals that do well, just a number of things in my mind, and I came to the conclusion that it's got to be Lake Mead, and I'll tell you why. Lake Mead, for one, it's one of the largest reservoirs. There's it's beautiful in its own right, because it's a lot of pristine shoreline, which is awesome. I like kind of fishing. It's one of my favorite lakes. But what makes this lake one of the toughest tournament bodies of water also makes it the best place to hold a tournament. And the reason being is that it is one of those lakes that's known to not have a home field advantage. That's because it changes all the time. One, there's not a whole lot of cover, as in, grass, brush, docks, or anything. There's virtually no docks besides marinas, and you can't generally fish those. And out west, there's a lot of marinas you're not allowed to fish. But what it does have is structure, rocks. And some of those shorelines don't have giant boulders either, but you got a lot of rock, there's a little bit of grass, but there's not a lot of that vegetation, and some of it has to do with the water levels. The water levels change so frequently on at least the two upper end Colorado River reservoirs, and that's Lake Powell, Lake Mead. You can have a year, I've seen it drop 80 feet, and then come back up. I mean, you have the huge water level fluctuations, and that affects one, fish population, but fish movement, where fish are going to be at. On Lake Mead, for instance, this year we're having the US Open again in October. If you do year over year, it looks to be about 15 foot down. And what does that mean to me? And some of the spots that I had last year are very well might be out of water. You could probably go camp on them. Now, Lake Mead's a diverse fishery, though, in the sense that it has largemouth, smallmouth, stripers, and they interact a little differently than they do in eastern reservoirs or lakes and Midwest lakes and reservoirs. The stripers are more, spread out throughout the lake, and they can even have impacts on the way the largemouth and smallmouth act, and sometimes they are intermixed around each other because they chase, mainly threadfin shad. There are gizzard shad in there now, which have alleviated some of the pressure. It used to be stripers would take their toll once the threadfin shad population had been reduced on bass and crappie, but now that's alleviated a little bit. But what you see at Lake Mead is more of a pelagic type largemouth and smallmouth. Almost, they move around. There's not as much per an acre. Also, the lake doesn't take pressure as well as other lakes. So you think that's Lake Mead, yeah, it is by Vegas. It does get some fishing pressure, but there's so much of it, and some of it's really hard to get to, that it wouldn't have that the ramifications of pressure like some other lakes. But it does, and it's actually exacerbated just because of the fact that there isn't that many fish per an acre. So when you get that kind of pressure, it changes the lake for an extended period of time, as opposed to some of these other lakes in the Midwest where you can have a tournament, 100 boat tournament, 100, 200 boat tournament, and turn around in a week and a half, and the lake's fishing back to normal. There's really you can do good as a local at Mead at times, but there really is no home field advantage. It's literally an equalizer. You go out there, there's been guys like Rick Clunn won the US Open to, a Justin Kerr and Aaron Martins to guys all over the country doing various things. There's a couple guys that have spent time there and done really well, but in general, I've looked at some of the standings in just regular tournaments when you have a diverse field. That's the best way to look at it when you're looking at how well locals do. So the US Open, some of the old Pro-Ams are the best way to look at it. And it's not always the guys from Vegas. In fact, if you take it in general, when you look at other tournaments, circuits, when you have locals, a lot of locals around the area that are fishing in the higher levels against guys from outside the area, they do generally not as well. So that's why Mead is the toughest tournament. Now you can argue in the Midwest, I had the grapple. I was thinking, well, maybe a Grand Lake is pretty tough because of how much pressure. And then but locals do well there. If you're a local, you have certain spots that generally have fish that go there. But if you're not a local and you go there to Grand for the first time, dissecting, understanding docks and understanding how different, rocks, it's kind of got that blend of an Ozark lake. It's tough to do well, but you'll catch fish. On Mead, you can legitimately go there and blank even if you are local, or come in with like one fish. In the east, I could say there's some highly pressured lakes that are not very good tournament waters just because they have so many tournaments. Like maybe a Harris Chain or like a Chickamauga, in the last few years. But I think in general, those lakes tend to bounce back the amount of fish that are in those reservoirs and how condensed it is. They're not as deep, or the availability for the fish to live throughout the water column is a little bit more condensed in these lakes. So majority of your fish, probably under 20 foot in a lot of these lakes for a lot of times, but Mead, you never know. Some of the times the tournaments there are won in legitimately 40 to 60 foot of water to winning in less than a foot of water in the same time of year over year. It's crazy. So, and you can have one good day and then have 2 horrible days pretty regularly there. I mean, it's one of those lakes that can be won finesse or power fishing, but usually never on one spot. It's a beautiful lake though, and like I said, that reason why it is the toughest tournament lake to do consistently well also makes it the best tournament lake, or the best for a spectator or whatnot to hold the tournament, because you can't just place your bets on guys that are from the area or big names, because it's an great equalizer in a sense. And that's why I like going to the US Open, because at any given year, it could be your year. You might find that spot, or you might grind it out. It really challenges the skills set of decision making and your ability to keep your mind sharp throughout the day, because it's hot. You're going to have at least one long day with 200 and something boats, at least one long day, and if you do well, you'd have 2 long days. So you got to be your decision making capabilities. You're going to go through long lulls of nothingness, and then all of a sudden being able to capitalize on what you do get is crucial on this lake. It's incredible, and that's why you go there and the prize money is pretty good for the US Open. And that's why that tournament still draws people, is because it is a challenge. It's a challenge of whereas I've kept endurance. That's a challenge of your endurance and your decision making capabilities. Where other lakes, you can almost like take an area and just take it apart. I've seen that happen on some of these lakes. Like, even if you're not from the area, well, I'm just going to dissect this area. And in general, I can look on the internet. There's generally fish here. Well, Mead, you can't do that to the same extent. But anyway, tell me what you think. What's the hardest tournament lake in the U.S.? Like I said, Mead for me, but that toughness also makes it one of the best. I have another one, but it's not generally a tournament lake. Maybe I'll talk about that one later, because it's another absolutely beautiful lake, and you catch a ton of fish, but they're all cookie cutter. So there's a couple of those lakes in the West, but if you do fish tournament in those lakes, it's literally a game of ounces. You can have from the winner down to like if there is 20 boats in some of these, down the last place, let's say, and there could be only a pound and a half difference or whatever. It's in some of these lakes are fisheries management maybe be lacking. But anyway, like, subscribe, and talk to you later.